All right, everybody, welcome back to Car Chat, our third episode. Thank you for your viewership over the first two episodes. We're very happy with all of your engagement and your questions and your feedback. Hopefully, like I said before, we're going to improve as we go. And I'm here with Carlos again. Hi, Carlos.
Hello. How's everybody doing?
Yeah. So we have an interesting topic today. It's the subject of many questions that I get, and I see some of those questions posted online on different forums, and it has to do with the semiconductor industry impact on the automotive industry. The fact that we can't buy new cars because you hear in the news that there's not enough ships to go into those cars and so on. Carlos has done a very good job in sort of looking for information on this and researching the latest. And we're going to talk about what that looks like, because there's many misconceptions, Carlos. And maybe we start by the first one that I hear, right? I hear that car companies are purposely, lowering their volumes and their output so that they can sell their cars more expensive and make more profit per unit. I've read that a lot. Obviously, that's what people think, that somebody's trying to make a buck out of this. What do you know, Carlos?
Well, I can tell you, man, that's not exactly what people think. It's a little bit more involved than what people may be thinking, that by reducing volume, we're going to be more profitable. It's far from the truth. We talk about auto industry, volume is king. You ask any auto manufacturer, volume is king. And to shoot yourself in the foot with volume is just not the right thing to do. So
car companies want to sell more cars.
Well, absolutely. Simply. I mean, that's a game of we make money selling cars. The less cars we sell, it's just not a good equation here. But let's dive into that a little bit, because the problem is a little bit bigger than what people think, in the sense of how the industries are tied and interconnected together, what things are going on nowadays in overall society, and what things are overall causing this major shortage going on. But I'm going to cover a little bit up front of what's a problem, all the things that are contributing to the problem that we see today, and then how it relates to the auto industry, what the auto industry is doing, right, in general, to cope with the shortage, how other things are being affected by it, potential solutions, and future state of what this might look like. So I plan to cover that in this segment. Starting straight up, I can say, the demand for chips have grown significantly in recent years. So a lot of experts would tell you it was eventually inevitable. Inevitable. I'm gonna have to cut that. Inevitable. Yes. The shortage would have to be inevitable. Oh my God, I did it again. I'll say it differently. The shortage was simply gonna happen no matter what. Okay, it was a matter of time, and the time.
And it's not because of cars only.
No, not at all. And so, starting with COVID-19, I can tell you that the pandemic forced the shutdown pretty much of many factories around the world, and when it happened, orders had to be cut, from factories that were responsible to make all these semiconductors. That's just standard process. Something like that happens, major shortage in volume. The shutdown pretty much said, hey, I can't keep ordering things when I'm not producing cars. So that has to be shut down. And that was cascading effect through all the tier ones, tier two, tier threes, all the way tier fives, and finally chip makers. In this time frame, we witnessed, if you noticed last year, a major digital transformation. There was a much higher demand for desktop, laptops, computers, cameras, home electronics. Everybody's working from home, right? Kids doing school. Everybody got bored being home, so ordering electronics and computers and gadgets and game consoles. And it's a major digital transformation. A lot of businesses that set up remote work, they needed to expand the cloud infrastructure to cope with the capacity of the workforce. And this is across not just the United States, but around the world. These things had to happen. There was also an unexpected surge towards the end of 2020, of vehicles, that vehicle sales, when things start reopening a little bit, caught the whole industry by surprise around the world, pretty much. And this surge basically forced a major shift of going from shutting down to reopening quickly, and how can we do it safely.
So
Uh,
you're saying there was unexpected demand at the end of 2020
at the end of
for
2020,
the,
the rise,
yeah,
it was nobody expected it in the market, and how quickly it would turn around. Why so many people wanted to get a vehicle, not just in the retail segment, but also in commercial. So, and that it was witnessed not just one company, it was around the industry completely, and in Europe
right.
as well. So it wasn't just a phenomena here in the
And the
US.
same with used cars and classic cars. I
Oh,
mean, the demand for classic cars, it was like people went through a pandemic and said, when am I going to spend this? You know, am I going to wait longer? Look at the things in the world. It's time to
yep.
go and make an impulse buy and get a new car or a classic car. So that, I think, compounded the issue, right?
Not only that, you got other things. If you recall, the rollout of 5G infrastructure came out
Right.
pretty much stronghold right and center of the year, which requires a larger demand of the semiconductors. Um, Along that, if you remember last year, we have a Chinese, the largest Chinese chip maker, SMIC, was blacklisted by the US Commerce Department. So that pretty much starts shortening what could be available in the market, right? Some electronic manufacturers, companies like Huawei, were able to place big orders to build a big stockpile of chips prior to being restricted by the US trade. That was all related to last year's trade war that was ongoing with
Right.
China. Um, if you recall too, there's been a huge demand for high-end video cards, specialized cards used for crypto mining.
But
That
you can't get them
skyrocketed.
right now. People are using them for crypto mining and,
That is
not for
correct.
gaming anymore.
It can be understated that the impact that that has caused in the semiconductor market. Car makers, with their just-in-time supply chains, came out short against the semiconductor industry when they couldn't adjust quickly for the demand, the rising demand at the end of 2020. It's like it doesn't work like that. I just can't tell you, here's the order, and tomorrow I start shipping you parts. Some of these
Right.
could take 1, 2, 3 months to me start resupplying to you. Other industries came in the queue and start requiring semiconductors. So all those things that I mentioned here contribute towards the reorganization of the order and the queue where you land when you come in and ask for parts. So that gives you a sense of how things were moving around the industry, but also it's important to recognize that if you recall last year in Texas, the bad winters, that shut down semiconductor plants in Texas. Samsung, Infineon, and NXP all shut down during that time frame. Taiwan had a severe drought from 2020 into 2021, and that caused a shortage of water. And water is one of the key items used in the manufacturing process for chips. I mean, it's a tremendous amount of water used on a daily basis. Just to get a sense, TSMC, which is the major Taiwanese manufacturer, the #1 chip maker in the world, they use approximately 156,000 metric tons of water. And if you don't have an idea how much is this, can you imagine 60 Olympic-sized swimming pools of water used on a daily basis? When
It's
there's
amazing.
a lot of drought and shortage, they have to ration and they have to come up with different solutions to how to support the process. So as of right now, they have been able to truck water and bring water in from the areas where they were, but production at this moment hasn't been shut down or affected by that. Also, the energy crisis in China, where some of the electronic suppliers, like for example, the Apple industry, all their components, two companies out there, Pegatron and TPK, have had to reschedule their lines because of the shortage and constraints imposed by their government, where restrictions on power schedules, they need to work around the clock, and how to come up with solutions for it. So as it relates to the auto industry, some of the effects that we can talk about is, when the manufacturer had to slow or stop production of the vehicles, there were no components available. That happened earlier to mid 2020 when the pandemic hit straight head on. Modern cars nowadays are very complex, and on average, vehicles nowadays use about 1,400 semiconductors. Just to give you a sense, how many are in
1,400
1,400
by car
on
for
average
each car.
Correct,
Wow.
per each car. And those things are used all around the car, ignition, braking, infotainment, safety systems, communications, radars, sensors, lidars. So all the things that we have turned pretty much an electronic device into our cars, that's what they are. And there's a lot of
Wow.
these modules all throughout the vehicle. Chip makers, they were able to commit, and some of them have come forward and commit to investing in new semiconductor plants, right? So they want to add capacity, they want to add relief to what's going on. But unfortunately, this takes somewhere between 2 to 3 years to get up and running and be able to start catching up with the increased demand that is in the market. One of the side effects of the shortage and tight supply that you can think of is for this demand that we have for chips, the lower volumes, that you normally see provided for high volume discounts that chip makers make, they have been able to remove slowly and take away some of those. Costs for the chips have gone up, in the packaging and the chips gone up. So anywhere between 20-30%, we have seen the chips perhaps in the market go up. Now, that doesn't necessarily translate straight into the end product. Those products that are high in chip content, like phones and things like that, could see a significant effect in prices. But generally, in vehicles where the electronic side of the total value equation of the car, those effects are very minimized and small. One of the things to notice is some of the chip makers say they have backlogs up to 40 weeks, just to give you a sense. Way long. Although the industry average is roughly about 21-22 weeks of turnaround as of this last September. So you give you a sense how much further behind we could be.
Well, yeah, I think it's complex, right? So I think you paint a picture of multiple effects on the situation. It's not just one issue. It's not just
it's a
car makers.
compounding
It's compounding, right? It's the situation with China over the last few years. Is availability of raw materials. Is, like you said, water. I used to work for Intel. I know the needs for water, and especially Intel built big factories in Arizona and New Mexico where there's not that much water, so it was quite controversial. My question is, right, and you're in the auto industry, has anybody thought about perhaps producing other types of cars during this situation, meaning more analog, less digital cars, right? More sort of going back in time a little bit, right? Turning the clock into cars that can also sell, right? That people might be interested in. I know there are people that are not necessarily interested in having CarPlay in their car, right? Cars like some of the rugged SUVs or the Jeep competitors like the Bronco and others. It's really more about the off-road capabilities rather than how many electronics there are in there. I'm just asking, right? This is me thinking. I know it's super hard to do a line changeover and produce something different in the midst of this situation, but it begs the question.
It would be most likely highly impractical to do. And the main reason for that is because we have so many integrated systems in the vehicle. And when you talk about removing some of that content, it doesn't come like a plug and play. I take this out and I go and make it work. It is so interconnected and related that we got ECUs and computer systems that are talking to each other. And some of the things that you're asking to do is removing some of that functionality. It goes back into the electrical architecture that we have in the vehicle. And that, my friend, doesn't happen overnight. And but But there are other things that the companies have been able to do, and I'll walk you through a couple of those right now. And how do we cope with the shortage, right? Um, one of the things that companies have been able to do, batch building. For example, we go and say, all right, we're missing X components, let's batch build. We can access those components later on, retrofit when those are available. And some automakers have been able to batch build, like over the summer, 30 to 60,000 vehicles, depending on what vehicle we're talking about, to come back later when the components are available, we retrofit and then start moving the inventory around. Other situations, like you mentioned and perhaps pointed out, maybe some of the vehicles could be built in configurations that some of these little things could be removed. For example, some automakers have been able to remove blind spot monitoring, a little device, a little light that you see monitoring for traffic. They've been able to remove that, and some manufacturers, in order to build models that don't have it. Stop start feature for fuel economy. We've seen that in some automakers do, removing lumbar support seats and things like that. That's another example of what we have seen. So there's some little things that can be done, but not major things can be done, because it goes back to the heart of what the vehicle does. But they also have been able to, say, for example, divert chips to certain type of vehicles. For example, vehicles that are in higher demand. If the higher demand for that vehicle is there, we divert chips for that one versus a model that has less demand at that moment, and try to fulfill what the market is looking for. Although vehicle pricing per se hasn't been affected for new vehicle prices, one thing that you probably have noticed is that the vehicle factory incentives have been significantly reduced. So pricing may remain the same, but not the incentives. Pardon?
I don't see the commercials for those incentives anymore. It's just not happening because there's no inventory.
You can't incentivize something that you don't have, basically, and promote the sale.
So you say the prices have not gone up, but let me give you an example of the new Corvette. You can't get it for the price that they announced as MSRP, right? Because they are making less of them, and that creates a bubble, right? And creates an incredible demand. And for some reason, dealerships are charging 20, 30K over what's supposed to be the MSRP. I'm not saying it's related to this issue, but automakers or dealerships are at some point taking advantage of this situation down the supply chain.
So, yeah, you hit a good point. From the manufacturer point of view, you could bias your builds toward higher margin, higher trim level vehicles. That's definitely possible. If I gotta sell a car, can I rather sell a car that sits in inventory, but it has a high margin, or a low margin one? Let's build the ones that could have higher margin, because I can't have 3 or 4 of them. I can only have 1 or 2, right? Just from a high level. But your point on the dealerships, due to that short supply, we have seen, and it's clear, dealerships have added premiums, due to this overall shortage in the market. And to a certain degree, it's actually justifiable. The reason being is, like, you got to maintain some level of safe revenue in order to keep the doors open at the dealership. And this is exactly where supply and demand is working on. When you don't have the supply to fulfill the market, it's a high demand, you got to adjust the pricing. That's how it works. People may not like it, but some of them have been able to go forward and say, I need a car, go ahead and do it anyway. But that translated also into the used car market. On average, vehicle pricing went up about 17% adjusted year over year due to low inventories. And say that comes out equivalent of about $4,000 higher that you normally would have seen this on average per vehicle. Some vehicles we see maybe 20, 30 grand, like you said. Other vehicles you may see maybe 1 or 2 grand above what normally would have sold for. It's just the inventory is not there.
And they're expected to go up even further. So, Carlos, we're 20 minutes in. And my question to you now is there light at the end of the tunnel? And when do you think, based on what you've gathered, that we will be in a position to go back to, let's say, normal, if normal ever comes back, right? Are we talking 2023, right? Is this now more also impacted by the whole shipping situation that we see at the ports, right?
Labor shortage.
What is it going worse before it gets better? What's your take?
Well, there's certain groups of people who believe it definitely will get worse before it gets better. There are others that think that we're in the middle of what's the worst is going to be, and the supply will eventually be relieved as we go along, because factories are working around the clock, and we're talking factories, chip factories, and they do work around the clock, and that process doesn't stop. Unfortunately, what people got to realize is that the supply chains for car manufacturing, it's actually very complex. You just don't turn off the faucet on this end, and then when you turn it on, it doesn't come out in this end here.
Right.
So just to give you a flavor, supply chains in some manufacturers could take somewhere between 7 to 8 months, okay, from the order way at the beginning to the moment that you receive your product and get it out the door. This is an area actually that a lot of manufacturers are looking into, to rethink the supply chain strategy and think, hey, what can we do about it? This is definitely way too complex. We want more control. And in order to get more direct control, some of the things that we're looking at is maybe moving towards designing some of their own chips and designing new circuits and components and modules that use either less chips or more common chips, so that
Right.
you can leverage what could be available in the market. So, and that doesn't happen overnight either. So lessons learned from what's going on right now is some of those things that I can tell you right now, but it will be a time where the overcompensation that could be available in the market in capacity could slowly start filling in those orders and then start bringing that in. But it's a slow migrating process. That one of the things I thought at the beginning, I don't think this is something that goes to 22. I think it goes into 23, where we may see easing off, and by then you probably see new ways of handling inventories at the
Right.
dealerships and OEMs. How do they manage that? More build to orders versus building big batches of vehicles.
Yeah. Or
So,
perhaps even car makers decide that it's a good business proposition to create their own chip manufacturing. Like you see somebody like Apple used to buy chips from Intel, and they decided we'd rather have our own, and they're developing their own now so that they can have more control over their supply chain. That could be something else that happens, right? Some partnerships between big automakers and some established chip companies, or they decide that this is something they want to do. A great example of that, Carlos, is IKEA. You know IKEA, the furniture company? Yeah.
yes.
So IKEA was being killed by suppliers of wood. So the owners of IKEA, hyper billionaires, right? They decided enough with this, and they bought forests in Scandinavia so they can have their own trees and they can have their own wood for their own furniture. And that's the way they control their supply chain, and they're not eaten by pricing changes or things like that. That is a great example of a company that decided to control end-to-end their supply chain. That's something maybe car manufacturers at some point will do, right? We have to wait and see.
Yeah, I think you're alluding to something that a lot of people keep thinking, that can they make their own chips? Well, that's a total order to go forward and say make your own chips. Not every industry can afford to do that. It is super expensive to create a line, a factory. Even the big chip makers, in this crisis, we know Intel announced that they're investing $30 billion in building new plants and upgrading facilities and the like. And to not stay behind, TSMC also announced that they were investing $100 billion over the next 3 years in building 2 new plants right in the backyard of Intel's facilities.
Right.
And on top of that, more research and development, which is a lot what is needed. So, but it doesn't come overnight. That's just capacity available that they're bringing in to the
Years.
surge in demand for all this industry coming together. But
right.
Your point is very valid, and I think maybe not so much from the auto industry, but maybe more of the overall tech industry, the Apples and Microsoft and the Amazons and Googles of the world with extremely deep pockets of money. They
Yes,
could be perhaps for their products developing perhaps their own lines, their own products, and partnering, creating a new consortium
makes
between
sense.
them for the US, but that requires a lot of investment. And now I
Yes,
gotta
you
ask,
need deep pockets. You know, everyone is Jeff Bezos that can build his own airline to compete against UPS and FedEx, right?
that's right.
But I think we will see some movement in industry because this situation, you know, it's has been teaching everyone that business continuity is a skill, right?
Yeah,
And we probably didn't anticipate this. We didn't anticipate a global pandemic, but then again, there's so many things playing out that I think it's going to be an interesting field, and I think we have to talk about this topic again in the future, Carlos. I think there will be probably many questions to answer, a lot of developments over the next few months that we'll probably have to do another episode and bring some updates on the topic. And I want everyone to comment, right? What do you think is causing this issue? What is the information you're gathering? What do you hear? Are you impacted by this? Tell us. Are you not able to buy the car you want?
let me
We
give
need to
you
know.
one
Yeah.
piece of information. Your question you ask about, can the auto industry do something about it? And maybe some of the big players can do something. Um, just as a data point, Apple by itself is the single largest semiconductor consumer buyer of the world, where they consume or buy 11% of all the chips available in the market, just themselves. That's about $54 billion just last year in 2020. The overall global auto industry spends approximately $40 billion. So you got a single
Wow.
company, cheap like
Right.
Apple,
Well,
consumes a lot more than the whole auto industry.
we're not surprised,
So that gives you an
right?
idea that they do have a capacity and ability with all those big pockets to be able to create perhaps a solution if they get together and set up
Right.
the right solution.
And this could be a bonanza for new semiconductor companies, right? So with this level of demand, it creates opportunity. So
Yes,
hopefully we'll see some movement. We want new
I hope
cars,
so.
Carlos,
We want new
you know,
cars.
so you want to sell more cars. We know
We
that.
want to sell more cars, no doubt about
All
it.
right. So thank you, Carlos. It's
You're
been an
welcome.
interesting topic. We're gonna cover it again. I want everyone to subscribe. Here's the link. Hit the notification bell so you know when Car Chat is coming along. We're trying to post, if possible, every Friday. The video goes live at 12, and then from there you can watch it. And hopefully you're enjoying the topics. We have many other topics to talk about coming soon on Garage Bots. Thank you, Carlos.
You're welcome.
Until next time, remember to subscribe and see you around again soon. Thanks.
See ya.